there's yet another
yes.
embarrassing headline, I think.
It'll get your goat, but it just feels like straws on a camel's back, doesn't it, at the minute? This is Cabinet Minister Liz Kendall. She's been branded a hypocrite because she was the one sort of behind her department removing the winter fuel payments for 10 million pensioners, while heating bills at her second home are being met from, guess what, the public purse. That means we're paying.
The Work and Pensions Secretary says she is allowed to claim costs for what is her second property in her Leicester West constituency.
The most recent documents reveal that taxpayers covered just under £4,000 in her energy bills, as more than 100,000 pensioners, we understand, are very likely to be forced into poverty.
Well, joining us now, political commentator Peter Spencer. Morning, Peter.
Good morning.
While this may be within the rules, and we've all heard about these rules for second homes for MPs before, haven't we? While it is within the rules, it's just not a good look. And should we go as far as to say it's hypocrisy?
It is a classic Daily Mail stitch-up, to be perfectly honest, because MPs, if they have a constituency outside London, they have a second home and it is subsidised by the taxpayer. It happens that she's married to a swanky banker, and so they've got a swanky gaff in Notting Hill, which means it's going to cost a lot more to heat than the pokey little flat that an awful lot of MPs have to settle for when they're working in London. All that said, there's no getting round the fact that the whole cut to the winter fuel payment for so many pensioners wasn't particularly well sold. It was sprung on people, and the backlash has continued from the moment that they announced it. And I have to say, it feeds into the rather broader picture of this government not doing particularly well in selling its message. The budget, again, in this case, they decided, look, we really have got to chuck some money at public services, otherwise they're going to crumble to dust. But having promised not to increase the usual revenue sources, which are, of course, VAT, income tax and national insurance right across the board, they got their hands tied behind their back, in effect. And so the grumbles and the grizzles and the screeches that have been going on ever since that budget have in no way abated. So Starmer does have a problem with the whole messaging story. And of course, this fits into the narrative of the fact that his personal popularity and that of his government has absolutely plummeted since the general election.
I mean, you say, Peter, a stitch-up. In that, you know, it's one of those things, isn't it? It falls within the rules. It's all perfectly allowed. However, that was the case with the expenses scandal. There were some MPs who obviously were doing something which wasn't right, but a vast majority of MPs who paid back money, not because they broke the rules, but because the Prime Minister at the time said, well, it's sort of what is morally right to do. Doesn't that apply to this?
I mean, it is a very, very difficult problem. Of course, MPs, I come back to it, they do have to have a second home somewhere within reach of Westminster if they've got a constituency 100 miles away, like Liz Kendall has in Leicester. And so it is going to stick in the craw of a fair few people, especially at a time like this, when I come back to it, the cut to the abolition of the winter fuel allowance for so many pensioners is going to cause a lot of problems for many people. And so any way of getting back at these guys, they sure are going to take a pop.
Let's start with the Mail on Sunday, because a lot of people might want to enjoy Christmas, but they won't be able to afford to pay to heat the house. Meanwhile, front page of the Mail on Sunday, there's a certain minister, Liz Kendall, who she's the one who was behind axing some of the winter fuel
She was the
payments.
architect, yep.
And she is claiming for fuel payments herself for her second home, because as a minister, as an MP, she can have a second home. Is this unfair, and is it hypocrisy, or is it just acting within the rules?
Well, it's acting within the rules, and it's an allowance. Every MP gets it. So it's not as if that she's being singled out. So it would be a bit like companies pay various allowances to people. So you get, if you work in the capital, you get London waiting. If you bring your own equipment to work, you get a tool allowance.
Do you?
Yeah.
I wish I'd known that.
My laptop.
Well, I'll give you a chance to get a new allowance then. And obviously, if you're travelling a lot, you get a car allowance. So that's what business does. It's irrespective of what you might earn or how rich you are or anything like that. So I don't see anything particularly wrong with what she's done. I would like to have seen Rachel Reeves change the system whereby that £300 that was a flat rate was actually taxed. So she got some money back from people who could afford it. It didn't penalise the people at the bottom rather than scrap it completely. But as far as these things, we're always having a go at MPs for money they're getting. But unless you go back to 1911 when they weren't paid at all, which I think a lot of people would like, I think you've got to allow them. That's what the modern world is like. You've got to allow them the extra...
It doesn't smell right. It doesn't smell right, does it?
No, and that's it. And I think the use of the word allowances, I'm not convinced that that's the right word. Yes, there are expenses you can claim, doesn't mean you have to claim them. It's not as if she is given the money and all MPs are given the money. You have to physically submit bills and claim that money back. Now, she could take the view, as a good socialist, that she shouldn't.
Especially if she's married to a multimillionaire.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's like arguing that Rishi Sunak, who was a billionaire, shouldn't have taken his salary when he was Prime Minister.
There's nothing to do with the salary. We're talking about something
that the Labour... Well, he didn't have to take it. I mean, under your argument about they don't have to take this money, he didn't have to be paid. Some ministers aren't paid.
He wasn't cutting other people's salaries, though, was he? You have a Labour government who is just taking off...
Give us the worst tax in 35 years.
OK, and obviously Labour are doing such a tremendous job at not taxing us any further at the moment, aren't they? They're taking £300 off the most vulnerable people coming into winter, whilst then taking an extortionate amount of money for heating a property that she doesn't live in all of the time. You could take the view that she doesn't have to, given that she earns quite a good salary as an MP, top that up with a ministerial salary from what her partner also earns. Between the pair of them, they could probably pay the fuel bills for the second home.
Stop. I mean, do you actually say, look, MPs should fund their second home?
No, I'm not saying that whatsoever. But if you are a Labour government and you are suggesting that things should be fair and you need to redistribute wealth, you cannot then be hypocritical and say, apart from my heating bill for a house that I don't live in, the second home.
She must have the heating on all the time.
Well, she must.
Not there at £350.
It's an enormous bill.
We don't know how often she is there. It is in her constituency, and because she has a constituency where she does, she has to have two homes, and that applies again to every MP of every party. So the same thing applies to Conservative MPs, some of whom are very rich.
But if you've been waiting for years to get into government, and then you get a job as Work and Pensions Secretary, and you know you're going to axe those winter fuel payments for some pensioners, wouldn't you think maybe I should actually look at my own fuel payments and not claim them this year?
But do you not then get a situation whereby other MPs would feel the same way? So Keir Starmer...
Why not, if they can afford it?
But it is a matter for them then personally to have a look at. But if you are a party looking to distribute wealth across the country because you don't think things are fair, then you shouldn't be able to take it yourself.